Welcome to the Anonymous Andrew podcast. Life and the choices we make. The choices other people make. Why we choose to ignore the red flags. Red flags like gaslighting, cheating, addiction, mental illness, and much more. What role do they play in relationships? Follow me each week as we discuss these topics with anonymous guests and experts to hopefully become better humans, resulting in better choices. And like I say, been there, still doing that. Now on to the show. Welcome to episode 2, the Anonymous Andrew podcast. Okay, so this episode is called The Red Flags. And I got to be honest with you, I'm new at this, and I've been learning the ins and outs of podcasting, editing, and it has taken me several days. So I had a draft and bullet points and sat down and jotted down all the memories. What I'm going to be talking about is my last relationship, which was a unbelievable story. Just unbelievable. And, you know, I posted something on my Instagram account that I wasn't going to talk about any one specific person that I had dated or was in a relationship with. But this particular episode is going to be about this past relationship that ended abruptly. And I am not going to identify her. I am not going to give you any details about her. My goal here is to point out the red flags, the odd behaviors that were emanating from this person. I don't blame this person for the content that you're about to hear. And by the way, some of it is explicit. Okay, there is an explicit warning on this. Because there is some sexuality that has to be spoken about. I'm not calling her out because it is ultimately my responsibility when a red flag appears and presents itself, what I do with that red flag. I can choose to ignore it. You know, in many relationships, especially when they call it, quote unquote, the honeymoon period, we just, love is blind, right? We don't want to see the character defects in other people. But I'm not talking necessarily about character defects at this point. We're talking about life and the things that are going on in this person's life that if someone came up to you and told you this story, you would have said to me or that person, what were you thinking? Because on paper, it's a disaster. But at the moment that I was in it, I was any number of things. First of all, let's just call a spade a spade. I'm codependent. Okay, so I ended up with a beautiful woman. Here, let me start the story. I met her on a very well-known dating app, and I never for a moment thought that she would answer me, but I reached out to her and I commented on something on her profile, and sure enough, I got a response. And oh my God, she was beautiful. She's not from this country. She's from another country, emigrated here 25 years ago. I'm not going to identify her ethnicity, but absolutely stunningly gorgeous. The picture she had little blue tints of streaks in her hair, and the smile was just infectious. So we hit it off, and for weeks, and it seemed like 2 or 3 weeks, we texted and FaceTimed and spoke on the phone. And this was early June 2020. And ultimately, we met on a first date. She brought a friend along, which is not unusual these days. And as it turns out, that I happen to have known this person a long time ago. And let's fast forward. So we started dating. And oh my God, we clicked. It was, at the time, I hate the cliches, but like the match made in heaven and soulmates and all that stuff. But here's where, all right, let's get into the red flags. From the beginning, I was told that she was divorced, but still living with the ex-husband. And of course, I asked why. And it was, well, she had a business in the house, and they both co-owned the home, and they've been living there for 20-something years. And just because COVID shut down the business, she wasn't going to move out. But he ended up cheating on her, and so she moved to the upstairs apartment. And so I thought was going to go out living her life. And the arrangement that I was told they had was that they were going to live under the same house, under the same roof, but live separate lives. Well, that was anything but the case. I was also told that she went on this dating app that we met to get revenge because he cheated on her. So her intent was not to actually meet somebody, but she did. She met me. And we fell in love, and we started a relationship. And I remember one day we were sitting on my couch, and I think we had just come back from the beach or something, and we had already said, as a matter of fact, I think at that beach that day, it was the first time we said I love you to each other. I think she said it to me first, and I said it back, and we're back at the house. And by the way, this is maybe neither here nor there, but we had not been intimate for 2 to 3 months. We were celibate. We didn't have our first sex for about 3 months. So we're sitting on my couch, and she says to me, you know, while I'm falling in love with you, and I find you extremely attractive, and I am very interested in pursuing a relationship with you, I cannot be a full-time girlfriend. And I didn't quite understand what that meant at the time, but being so love blind and blindsided and just mesmerized by her beauty and the fact that I was, oh my God, I was so lucky, I hit the lottery. I was like, yeah, whatever, I'm in. And so, but let's quickly take a look at some of these red flags that are already had appeared, and I chose to ignore them. So you got an ex-husband living in the same house that cheated on her, that she was now still living with. She went on a dating app to get revenge against the ex-husband, ends up falling in love with somebody. And then I was told, I don't think it was that day, but shortly after, that there were some men that she was still talking to on the app. And I questioned her about that. I said, well, wait a minute. I thought we agreed we were going to pursue a relationship and we're in love. And this became the beginning of many answers that I just couldn't rectify. I mean, she would look at me and give me a non-answer or a bizarre answer or an explanation that just didn't make sense. And I think in the end, she just liked the attention that she was getting from all these men. But I do believe at that point in time, she was interested in me and only me, but she was talking to other men. And I said to her, would you please block them? And can we not make this an issue? And I got the sort of nod, like, yeah, I'll take care of it. And I was under the impression that that was the end of that issue. And boy, was I wrong. I may have left something out. There was something after the affair occurred, way before she met me. She had done something to the ex-husband in a revengeful tactic style to embarrass him. And I'm not going to mention it. I'm not even going to allude to it. But that was a red flag because she did tell me, and it was quite horrific. So telling me that tells me that this person was capable of doing something. I just can't say it. So, all right, let's fast forward. another month or two goes by, and one day she comes to me and says, "Listen, I have tickets to Florida that I had pre-COVID, and of course because of the restrictions and especially in Florida, you couldn't go to Florida without whatever the case was. The tickets were now viable, and she wanted to take this trip to Florida, and I said, "Oh, okay. Why don't I see if I can get a seat on the same flight and we'll go together?" And she was like, "No, I'm going to visit a friend of the family." And in the early days of this relationship, she made it very clear to me that, remember the statement, "I can't be a full-time girlfriend." She was not going to introduce me to many people. She said that she needed to keep this relationship a secret. Red flag. And as a matter of fact, she asked me not to post anything on Facebook, and please don't go telling people that we're seeing each other. Red flag. But of course I obliged, or I chose to ignore the obvious. And okay, so she goes to Florida to visit this quote unquote friend from the family, and this was our first real upset. I started getting pictures from Florida. Her and this male that she was visiting, who seemed to be her age, was not a bad looking guy. And she was there for a week, and I got pictures of them lying in bed. No, they were clothed, but seemed like they were rolling around, and they were making funny faces to each other. They were taking selfies. This is not something you do with a friend of the family in a bed. And you know what? Whether it's a bed or a couch or the floor, the pictures were inappropriate. And yet she sent them to me. And I called her out on them. And I even said to her, I'm not comfortable with this, and if this is how you're going to behave in this relationship, I have to think long and hard about if this is the type of relationship I want. That was the first time I put my foot down, i.e. tried to establish a boundary, and it backfired because I got the following statement. First, she was shocked that I said that, and then she said, "Well, if you don't want me, there's plenty of men waiting to take your place." There's plenty of men waiting to take your place. She was so vain that that I was so replaceable that so my concerns about what her behavior was didn't faze her. She was FaceTiming me one night when she was down in Florida, and she was whispering. And they were supposed to be sleeping in separate bedrooms, right? And that's what I was told. But she was whispering, and it was like, "Yeah, he's asleep in the next room, but I'm FaceTiming you." And I'm like, "Why are you whispering?" And really what it comes down to is, why are you hiding that you're FaceTiming me? Just odd behavior. On a trip to Florida, that she wouldn't let me come with her to visit a friend of the family that didn't seem to be a friend of the family. It seemed to be more like a very close acquaintance. And to this day, I wonder if it's one of these men that she was talking to on this dating app, and maybe he got her to come down to Florida and spend a week. I don't know. But it's a red flag. And I didn't choose to ignore that. I did confront her on it, but it backfired. Remember, I was told if I didn't like it, there were men waiting to take my place. Okay, so I have to remember many of these incidents, and they may be out of order, but as they come to me, and I did jot some of them down, I would say, like, here comes some new incidents. From day one, we only saw each other on the weekends. She could not see me during the week. And when I asked her why not, it was because the ex-husband was very remorseful for the affair he had, and he wanted her back, and she needed to keep peace in the house so she could stay there, because she wasn't in the position to move out, and if she moved out, she might not necessarily get the equity in the house that she had put into it. I got all these long-winded, convoluted explanations. So bottom line is that she couldn't get out of the house during the week. So we saw each other only on the weekends, because he would literally prevent her from leaving the house. There was 1 or 2 times when she tried to come down, and he literally would, of course, she was dressed nicely and she put a makeup on, and he would see her walking out the front door, and he literally blocked her and told her that she couldn't leave. So red flag. Okay. So she would come over on the weekends, and at noon on Saturdays and Sundays, the ex-husband would call. Almost like 11:55, 12:05, he would call from his job. And I would say, why is he calling? And she said, well, he's checking in. He thinks I'm home, so he's checking in on the babies. Now, the babies were the animals, the pets that they had. They had several dogs and cats. So this was their only bond connection. So now she had a child of her own from another lifetime, but adult child. But this ex-husband seemed to be concerned about the pets. Now, why he can't go to work and not worry about the fact that she's home and she's going to take care of the animals? But of course, she wasn't home. She was with me, but he didn't know that. But every weekend we got that phone call, and she would take that phone call into my bedroom and, of course, speak in her native first language. And at the time, I didn't know that language. Now, ultimately, as the relationship went on, I didn't try. I started learning her language. It took took almost a year before I was able to start to pick up the conversation she was having on the phone. It took a long time for her to even spend one night. I tried so many times to get her to stay over on a weekend night, like a Saturday night. And we pulled it off one night. And listen to this. This is how we pulled it off. He worked very early in the morning, so he went to bed early at night. So she would wait till he goes to bed and then text me and say, come get me. Now, she lived about 30 minutes away. So I would leave my house 9:30ish, get there at 10. I would text her that I'm there, and she would come running out from behind the house, hiding in the bushes, jump in my car, and we would head back to my place, and she would spend the night. And of course, he would get up at, whatever godly hour in the morning and go to work. He would see her car in the driveway, so he naturally thought that she was upstairs sleeping. Thank God that he never checked to see that she was up there. But these are the beginnings, stages of the red flags have already been, flying high, but the behaviors and I got to give her. Listen, I got to give her effort. I asked her if she could stay over, and she made it happen. So, who was I to complain? I'm not going to complain. She made it happen, and it became somewhat of a regular, every other weekend kind of a thing. But she made it very clear to me that she was taking a huge risk by doing this. That if she got caught, that all hell could break loose. I don't know what hold this man had over her, but she was deathly afraid of him. So, but of course, being everything from codependent and mesmerized by her beauty and in love with her at this point, I started to tolerate and put up with all of this wacky, crazy, bizarre behavior. Okay, let's proceed with some more examples. Not too long, I don't know, maybe 8 months in, she took another trip to Florida. And this time it was to visit a brother. And I think it was her father's birthday, and they were all meeting down in Florida. And they were going to have this big party for Dad. And I had met most of the family. I had met maybe two members. So I was still she was still hiding me. So of course I couldn't go to Florida. And when she got down there, and I was like, hey, how was Dad? And how was the birthday party? And she said, oh, well, Dad didn't come. He didn't want to make the flight. And the whole concept was to go to Florida was to celebrate her father's birthday. So I don't think she went down to celebrate her father's birthday. I think it was another trip to Florida for something else. There was another trip to Florida, another several months later. She's got this, well, we both do. I'd like to move to Florida eventually and retire there. But she's got this fascination with Florida. But she lived there a while back. And anyway, she made another trip. It got to the point where I said, look, if I'm going to get, and of course she never took me on any of these trips. So I said to her one day, I said, hey, why don't you and I go to Florida? I will take you on vacation down there. And that's exactly what we did. At this point, she was able to manipulate her ex-husband with some phony baloney story of she was going to go visit some friends in New Jersey or some state, and she made up this whole story, and she told me this was a big risk for her. But we got on a plane, we flew down to Miami, I booked an Airbnb, and we landed on a Thursday night, got up Friday morning, and we went to the Keys, the Florida Keys, because I hadn't been there and she's never been there. And we're both very familiar with Florida. My parents were down there and I have family down there, but I just never been to the Keys. So we went to see the Keys, spent the whole day there, came back that afternoon. We left early and got back about 5 o'clock. And when we got home, we're back to the Airbnb. We walked in and I said, oh, I'm hungry. And what do you want to do for dinner? And she looked at me and she had some sort of a attitude, or I could see her mood had changed. She said, nothing. I'm not hungry. I'm going to bed. And she literally climbed into bed and pulled the sheets over her. I had a wet bathing suit, wet towels, all this stuff that we had taken to the Keys. So I went out to the car and pulled everything out, and I decided to do a load of laundry, and she had gone to sleep, at least so I thought. So now it's like 7 o'clock and I'm hungry. So I go out and I go get something to eat. I will admit, at this point, this is an error on my part. I brought food for me. I did not buy food for her, and that was a big faux pas. But I come back, and the lights are out, so I climb into bed, go to sleep. Now, I mentioned I'm in a 12-step program, so the next morning I get up. There was a meeting that I wanted to go to at 7 a.m. I go to the meeting. I come back about 8:15. The Airbnb has been vacated. Her suitcases, her clothes, her cosmetics, her toiletries, gone. Everything was gone. After about an hour of trying to raise her on the phone, like texting and calling, and I finally got her to pick up. And she tells me she's on an Amtrak train somewhere north of Orlando, and she was going home. And I said, can you explain to me why you just left me in Florida? Now, listen, it's not about the money, and it's not about, I did spend some money to go down there, but it was, we were supposed to, this was our first real trip together from when I'm not supposed to be seen with her, and I can't be on Facebook with her, and blah, blah, blah. But I got her to go to Florida with me, but it lasted 2 days, not even. She left me down there, and it was because she didn't like that I didn't bring her food back the night before. She didn't like the way I was driving back from the Florida Keys. You know, I may not be the perfect boyfriend, and obviously I've failed at many relationships, but one thing I know about is communication. When I got back from my meeting that morning, she should have been waiting for me, and she could have surely let me have it. Like, I'm angry at you. You didn't bring me food back last night. I didn't like the way you drove. I'll be honest. It was I-95 in Florida, that corridor. You can do 80 miles an hour, and I was doing 80, 90 miles an hour, and I think at one point I was trying to change my wet T-shirt or something, so I'll give it to her. I was being a little reckless. But you don't leave your boyfriend in Florida over this. But in the end, I don't think she left Florida because of that. I think she got me to fly her to Florida. I think she went up north and went to somebody else's place. I was her free trip down there. I don't know if it was another man from the dating app. I don't know if it was this guy from the first trip she went to Florida, but I don't think she went home. Long story short on this one is that a week, as far as I was concerned, the relationship was over. I spent a couple more days in Florida. My son lives down there, so I visited him. I come home, and I don't know, 5 days later, I get a phone call from her, and she says, I'm outside. She came down to my house. And this is the odd part, is that this is not the type of person she is. She was extremely sorry and extremely remorseful for doing with that, and almost begged me to take her back. And of course, I didn't want the relationship to end. I was angry. So codependently and ignoring the flags, I took her back. It wasn't an easy thing to do, but I did it. Okay, next I'm going to talk to you about some of the other odd behavior. We all text our girlfriends, boyfriends during the day, husband, wives, but I work, she didn't work. So texting during the day was spotty at best. We would always talk at lunchtime, but there were times when we would always say good morning. There was always a text good morning, or even a phone call. There was always a phone call at lunch. And if I wasn't too busy, maybe 2:30, I would shoot her a text, hey, how's your day going? And in the beginning, I would always get a response. But a year into the relationship, during the early part of the second year, I started to not get responses. And, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock would go by, and I don't get a response. And finally, I get home at 6, and all of a sudden, I get a text at like 7:15, and I was like, where you been all day? I've been trying to get a hold of you. And I get the bizarre answers. My phone was in the other room charging for 5 hours. And by the way, she had an Apple Watch. So you get text messages on your Apple Watch. So if the phone was indeed charging in another room, she would have gotten the message. But I know her. She's got countless social media accounts, countless WhatsApp groups on her phone. She was glued to her phone 24/7. I just didn't buy it. It was just a straight up lie. So she was obviously out where she shouldn't have been. And this leads me to the next one. We developed a routine on Friday nights because she couldn't get out, mostly, and we would watch a movie on Netflix together. We would pick a movie. Each week we alternated. She picked one, I picked one, and at 7:30 we would call each other, or she would text me 3, 2, 1, and we would queue up the movie at 9 seconds or whatever, and we would watch the movie remotely simultaneously. So she would watch it from her home, I would watch it from my home. It was the best that I could get from her. She wouldn't go to the movies, or I don't think they were open. It was still COVID. And that was the closest I was going to get to taking her to the movies and watch a movie with her. And then, of course, we would call at 9:30 and talk about the movie and then say goodnight. There were numerous times when 7:30 would roll around those Friday nights, and I would text her at 7:20 and say, hey, you ready? I'm queued up to like the 8-second mark. I wouldn't get a reply. 7:40, 7:50, 8 o'clock. Another disappearing act. Gone. 8:15, I get a call, and I can hear her running up her stairs to her apartment, and she's out of breath, and I can hear the keys jingling, and she's trying to get in the door, and she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm really late. Just give me a minute to change, and I'll cue up the movie, and we'll watch the movie." And didn't even give me the chance to ask her why she's late and where was she. But you know what? At this point, I'm getting used to this. So, but ultimately, it happened more than one time. So I finally had to say to her, "Please tell me what's going on?" And she finally came clean with me on one of them, and she said to me, "I got invited to dinner. So-and-so impromptu called me up and said, 'Hey, let's grab a bite to eat.' And it was like 5 o'clock or something. And she says, I thought I had plenty of time, that I would eat dinner and get home by 7:30. And she said that she knew by like at 7:10 when they were still there that she wasn't going to make it. And I said, well, why wouldn't you text me or pick up the phone and call me and say, 'Hey, babe, I got invited by Nancy to go grab dinner, and I'm going to be late. So can we watch the movie at 8:30? And her answer to me was, again, a non-answer. She shrugged her shoulders like she didn't know how to answer that. She just didn't have an answer. Because I think that wasn't the truth. She didn't go to a restaurant. Okay, let's go on to, we're going to segue into different things here. A lot of these disappearing acts, or she would tell me she was going someplace. A family member of her had a boat, and during the summer, sometime during the week, they would go boating. We live in an area where there's a lot of boating. And I would get pictures throughout the day saying, "Hey, we're out on the body of water." And I would get pictures of her and her brother. And but here's where it gets weird. This happened frequently, and I got to tell you, folks, I got suspicious. So I started looking at the metadata of the pictures, and a lot of times, so many times, they just didn't match. The dates weren't right. I know what kind of cell phone she had, and the metadata tells you what cell phone took that picture. And you can tell if that picture came from that cell phone or was it forwarded from another cell phone. And so many times it just was not. Also, if you notice on some of the newer cell phones, it'll actually give you the GPS of exactly where that picture was taken and the date and the time. That can all be altered. And I think there were times when she didn't alter it because she didn't think I would check, but then she started catching on and started to play with the meta settings, and she made some mistakes. And here's an example. Told me she got tickets to go see a band at one of our local venues, some band that she really wasn't like a big fan of, but her brother had an extra ticket, and she said, "Look, do you mind if I go?" And I'm like, again, what am I going to say? No. And so I get a picture of her and her brother driving to the venue. Or actually, they went to dinner first. So a picture of her driving to the restaurant. And it was her in the front seat of the car taking a picture of her brother driving. And I know the car her brother has. An hour later, I get another picture from her saying, "Hey, we're off to the venue to see the concert." It was a completely different man driving the car. And it was a different car. I could tell by the steering wheel. I could tell by the door and the mirrors. And you got to remember, these pictures today are quite detailed. The resolutions are good. And I could tell that one was a Nissan and the one was an Audi, two different makes of cars. So, okay, the second part of this monologue, we're going to get a little bit explicit, and I'll be right back. You're not going to know this, but I have to take a few minutes here to collect my thoughts on this next segment. Actually, before I do move on to the more explicit content, I just want to make a few notations here. This is what gaslighting looks like. This is where, when you're presented with something that clearly does not make sense, the pictures, the explanations, the lies, the deceptions, the disappearing acts, all of it, and you're called, I was called, I'm being paranoid, and this is typical gaslighting. They make you question your own sanity. And there were times when I really had to look at the picture and listen to the explanation and just say, well, maybe it is me. Maybe she did go to that concert, or one day it was her birthday, and I had planned a whole day around for her, and it was a Sunday. And she came down. I picked her up. She lived 30 minutes away. I picked her up, came down. We made breakfast. I gave her presents. And about 11:30, I get this. She comes to me and says, I just got a text message from my brother, and there's some documents in my house that he needs. Now, he lived in another state, ran some business, and somehow documents in her house had to be FedExed to a client somewhere in the United States by 4 o'clock that afternoon. Otherwise, he was going to lose a deal that he's been working on for months. If you just listen to that right there, that doesn't make any sense. If this guy's working on a deal, what are these documents doing in her house, not his house? But the story is that she asked me to drive her back home so she can get these documents and get them over to FedEx or UPS. I think it was UPS. And I was like, and she showed me the text message. Okay, she would literally open up her app, WhatsApp, and of course it was in her native language, but I saw the words UPS, I saw her brother's name, and she just showed me the phone long enough to see something about documents, and I need them by 4 o'clock. But you know, the date and the time and some of the details weren't, I didn't look long enough to see. But as usual, I was like, okay, hon, let's go. We jump in the car. And on the way up there, she says to me, look, just drop me at my house and you go over to Chili's. That's where we were going to have lunch, I think. And I'll meet you there. And I said, well, why can't I come with you? I'll come to the house. You run in, you get the documents, and we'll run over to UPS and we'll mail them. No. Go to Chili's and wait for me there. I will meet you there in 45 minutes. I did that. So I go to Chili's, and sure enough, I don't know, within the hour she shows up, and we go to lunch. But at this point, my head is just spinning because I know she's lying. And again, why can't I be with her? Why did she need to separate from me? This is on her birthday. And she tried to take the high road. She knew she was caught in a lie. But it was her birthday, and she said, let's just go and have a good day. So we went shopping, and we did a few things, and we ended up at Staples, of all places, because we had to pick up something on a project we were working on together. And inside Staples was a UPS drop-off center. And I said to her, this was around the corner from where she lived. I said, oh, is this the UPS that you dropped the documents off? And she grabbed my hand and pulled me down one of the staple aisles to the card stocks. We were making some cards that we were making, and diverted me from the question, wouldn't answer the question, and literally just pulled me away. I find out later, and another whole story, like almost a month or two later, that she indeed lied to me. And the explanation that I got, again, I think was a lie. I'm not going to get into it, but the point is it was just one after the other after the other. This woman was living two lives: our relationship and her world. It's the only way I can put it at this point, and there's a lot more. Okay, so if you're family member, friend, or just somebody who doesn't want to hear the next part, it's sexually explicit, you can tune out. Early in the relationship, when we would have sex, there were many times. Now, it wasn't frequent in the beginning, but it became more frequent as it went on. She would come over, and of course, sex was only viable on the weekends because we didn't get together during the week. So Saturdays and Sundays were reserved for our intimate time, and it was almost like clockwork. But one day she came over, and we ended up in the bedroom, and when she was in the bed, she would say the following words to me: "My vagina and my breasts are off limits." Now, I would say, "Why?" And she would just say, "Please just listen to what I'm saying." And she would offer something in return. And sometimes that's what we did. Other times I was told that I could pleasure myself to her while she lay there naked. And this happened, I got to count at least a half a dozen times. And ultimately I pushed her on it, and I got everything from I'm going through menopause to sometimes it just was, please just don't ask any questions and just do as I ask. And, in a relationship, when communication is key. If I think one time it was a UTI, she had a UTI infection, and maybe she did, but I didn't find out until weeks later when I pushed her on the issue. So if you're gonna make love to your boyfriend or girlfriend, and either one of you has a symptom, UTIs are not STDs, but it's something that you're supposed to avoid having sex when you have a UTI. And I get it. So you would say to the partner, "Hey, listen, I think I have a UTI. Can we either use a condom? Can we abstain today? Or can we do oral?" Or any one of the above. But you would present that argument up front, or present that excuse. These aren't the right words. You would just discuss it up front. But all I got was the arms across the chest and the hands across the pelvis, the genital area, saying off limits. And there was even a time when I looked down at her, and her entire pelvic region was engorged, inflamed. She was a thin, 115-pound woman. So when you look in that region, and I knew that region by heart, it didn't look right. It looked like it had been beaten, if you know what I mean. There was a time when, let's get into photographs. There was times of when she would share some of her intimate nude photographs. And I have to tell you folks, listen, I know it's common. Women send and men send these nudes back and forth to each other, and it's a big risk. Do it at your own risk. But she was very open to doing that with me. But I have to tell you that some of these pictures that I got from her, these were not her walking into a bathroom mirror and taking a selfie. These were pictures that were very professionally or very well done, planned out, or taken by somebody else. The quality was impeccable. Even some of them looked like the quality was not good, as if they were taken by a webcam. Even the poses that she was sitting in, as if she was sitting in front of a laptop. I have to tell you, folks, that I did some research. I got so tired of these lies and these manipulations and the gaslighting. I can't get into details, but I hired a PI, and I have some people that I know, and I did some research, and I got to tell you that the information that came back to me was gut-wrenching. And I called her out on it. Let's just say that there was activity being done on her half that was completely inappropriate if you're in a relationship. If you're not in a relationship, it's your business. I want you to read between the lines here, okay? I got to be careful. But just think about the times when I wasn't able to have sex with her because, and so now it makes sense. She was probably out the night before having sex with either multiple partners, and often even on a regular weekend when we did have sex, she would tell me that I had to go gently, that her vagina was sore. And again, I got all sorts of excuses. It's been like that since I was 15 years old. She had a childhood trauma and blamed it on that. And just all sorts of, again, gaslighting and excuses. And, you know, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'm not here to out her and hurt her. And it's just that if you come across these types of behaviors in any relationship and you stick around, I hung in there for 2 years, over 2 years. And it blew up 4 months ago. I won't get into the details of the ending, but it kind of ended the way she came over. I'm going to leave it there. This woman has some wonderful, beautiful qualities to her, which is why I fell in love with her. And it wasn't like this 90% of the time. It was like this 50 to 60% of the time, some of this stuff. There were so many beautiful times. We were beach people, and we often took trips. There's a place near us, about an hour drive from us, that we love to go on. We would go there frequently, and it's wine country, and I don't drink, but I'm just giving you the scenario where we went. And this relationship wasn't all like this. There were so many beautiful, beautiful times. I learned how to cook her native culture, her cuisine, and she did so much for me in my home. I live alone, and I'm like a bachelor, right? So when she met me, boy, she came in here and she decorated, and she bought me appliances and cleaned my bathroom. And I got to tell you, there were so many beautiful things about her. She's the one that taught me how to read tarot cards. I am now a tarot card reader, and I still do that. I do have an Instagram account on that. Well, some other day we'll get into that. So, folks, I'm going to wrap this up. Just the red flags. If you choose to ignore them, you're going to get burned. The breakup was the hardest breakup. Listen, I've been married and divorced. I had another relationship, and I had a child out of wedlock, and that relationship ended abruptly, and I've had some pretty bad heartbreaks. I was even engaged to somebody over 10 years ago, and that broke up, but that was more due to my being drunk. I was a drunk. I'm not gonna dance around that one. But this is my sobriety, and I'm with this woman, and she broke my heart. If you know anything about the tarot cards, the Three of Swords, that was my heart. And the Seven of Swords. Okay? Which is deception. That's the deception card. So, folks, we're going to get into all of this down the road with professionals and other people. I have other people who have the same story, similar kind of red flags. Why do we ignore these flags? Why do we choose to ignore them? Why do we allow ourselves to get gaslit? Why do we continue to think it's going to get better? And why do we continue to accept the lies and hope? And I don't know if I mentioned to you that I did get down on one knee and ask her to marry me about 3 months before the relationship ended, and she said yes. So we were technically engaged. And, of course, that never happened. We stayed engaged, and then it imploded. So, all right, I'm going to end it there. There's so much more I want to talk about, but it's really not about her. It's about the behaviors and the flags and how I chose to deal with them. And I want to help you identify. And why don't we stop at that time, 3 months in, 2 months in, the first month in, when she said to me, I cannot be a full-time girlfriend, and I live with my ex-husband, and I went on a dating site to get revenge, and I did something horrific, revengeful to her. I should have walked away at that point. This is not the type of person that I want in my life. But I was looking at a beautiful... Okay. Folks, Anonymous Andrew here, podcast, life and the choices we make. All I can say to you, if it feels good, do it. But please, choose wisely.